I have also done, after ABBA, I have done several solo records.
For decades, Agnetha Fältskog was known as the beautiful blonde voice of ABBA, the shy star with a smile that lit up the stage. But behind the hits and headlines was a woman quietly unraveling. Fame overwhelmed her, heartbreak silenced her, and tragedy forced her into hiding. She didn't just step back, she vanished. Now at 75, after years of silence, she finally revealed the truth we always sensed. Why did she leave it all behind? And what made her reveal it now? Join us as we uncover what might change how you see her forever. The voice behind the spotlight. Long before the flashing cameras and sold-out arenas, Agnetha Fältskog was just a young girl growing up in Sweden, surrounded by music and dreams. Born on April 5, 1950, in the city of Jönköping, she showed a love for singing at a very early age. Her father, Ingvar, worked as a department store manager, and her mother, Birgit, stayed at home to raise Agnetha and her siblings. There wasn't anything glamorous about her childhood, but it was filled with love, family, and the sounds of melodies floating through the air. She began playing piano as a child, and by the time she was 5, she was already writing simple songs of her own. She didn't do it for fame or attention. She just loved music. Her family noticed this talent and encouraged her, and soon, Agnetha began performing in local churches and school events. She was shy, but something changed when she stood in front of a piano or held a microphone. That's when she felt at home. But keep watching, because what comes next will surprise you. When she turned 13, she joined a local dance band called the Cambers. This was her first real experience performing with a group. The band performed around Jönköping and gave her the confidence to share her voice with others. Later, she joined another band, Bernt Enghart's Orchestra, and started traveling to perform. During this time, she also worked as a telephone operator, juggling her job during the day with music performances at night. One of her big breaks came when she recorded a song she wrote called Jag var så kär, which means I was so in love. It was a simple, sweet song about young love, and when it was released in 1967, it shot to the top of the charts in Sweden. Agnetha was just 17 years old. Suddenly, her name was in newspapers and magazines, and people across the country were singing along to her song. But even with this success, she remained humble. She didn't like all the attention. She only wanted to sing. Soon, German producers became interested in her voice, and she was even offered a chance to become an international star. But she turned it down because she didn't want to leave Sweden. She was very close to her family, especially her parents. She said many times that fame wasn't what she was chasing. All she wanted was to make music that people could feel. During this time, her career continued to grow, and she released several Swedish-language albums. She also appeared on TV and radio. Even then, people noticed that while she was beautiful and talented, she always seemed more reserved than others in the music scene. She didn't crave attention like some artists. She valued her privacy and quiet time. Around this period, in the late 1960s, she met Björn Ulvaeus, a member of the Hootenanny Singers. The two connected through their shared love of music, and their friendship quickly turned into something more. Then in 1971, Agnetha and Björn got married. The wedding was a major event in Sweden, and fans everywhere were excited to see two of the country's biggest music stars come together. Their marriage wasn't just a love story, it was also the start of a powerful musical partnership. Along with Benny Andersson and Anni-Frid Lyngstad, Frida, Agnetha and Björn formed ABBA, a band that would change pop music forever. But before ABBA exploded onto the global stage, Agnetha continued to work on her solo career. She even starred in a Swedish musical production of Jesus Christ Superstar, showing she could do more than just sing pop songs. And when ABBA officially formed in the early 1970s, everything changed. Their song Waterloo won the Eurovision Song Contest in 1974 and launched them into worldwide fame. Suddenly, Agnetha wasn't just a local star, she was an international icon. But with that fame came challenges she never expected. Agnetha had always been someone who preferred quiet. She liked staying at home, spending time with loved ones, and keeping a slow, simple life. But now she was flying from country to country, performing on the biggest stages, and being followed by cameras wherever she went. Fans adored her, calling her the blonde one from ABBA, and magazines praised her beauty and stage presence. But what most people didn't see was how hard it was for her to live under that kind of pressure. Touring took a toll on her. She missed home, and as a young mother, it was even harder. She and Björn had welcomed a daughter, Linda, in 1973. Agnetha once shared how heartbreaking it was to leave her child behind while the band was traveling. She felt torn between her career and being there for her family. She also struggled with flying. Agnetha had a deep fear of airplanes, especially after a terrifying flight experience during a storm. Because of this, traveling for shows became a real source of anxiety for her. While her bandmates could relax between performances, Agnetha often felt stressed and emotionally drained. And yet, every time she stepped on stage, she gave everything she had. As ABBA's fame grew, so did the pressure. The public always wanted more. More performances, more interviews, more appearances. Agnetha began to feel like she had no space of her own. She couldn't walk down the street without being recognized. Even though she smiled for the cameras, inside she felt overwhelmed. This stress affected her marriage as well. She and Björn were both working hard, raising a family, and trying to balance it all. Over time, they started to grow apart. In 1979, they divorced. It was a painful time for both of them, and even though they stayed professional for the sake of the band, the emotional strain was heavy. Their song, "The Winner Takes It All," which Agnetha sang, was widely believed to reflect the heartbreak she experienced. Even after the divorce, Agnetha continued performing with ABBA, showing incredible strength. She put on a brave face and kept singing, even when her heart was breaking. Many fans saw her as the shining star of the group, but few realized how much she was carrying behind the scenes. As the years passed, Agnetha started pulling back from the spotlight. She was still loved by fans, but she began to prioritize her personal life over fame. She raised her 2 children and stayed mostly out of the public eye. Even though ABBA's music continued to play around the world, Agnetha chose to live quietly, away from the noise. In the years after ABBA went on hiatus in the early 1980s, Agnetha focused on solo projects. She released a few albums and tried to maintain a connection with music, but she was also healing from the emotional weight of her past experiences. She lived simply, surrounded by nature and family, avoiding the public eye as much as possible. Stay tuned as we dive more into this story, because what happens next reveals even more about the woman behind the fame. The price of silence that changed everything. Agnetha Fältskog had always preferred quiet over crowds. After years of lights, stages, and interviews, she was still pulling away from the spotlight. While fans still adored her, she chose to live in peace, away from the chaos of fame. She had time with her children, her home, and the kind of stillness she had missed during ABBA's intense years. But even in the quiet, life didn't leave her untouched. Fame might fade from headlines, but its shadow still followed her. Even as she retreated from public life, painful moments crept into her world. In the late 1990s, Agnetha's life was struck by a devastating loss. Her mother, Birgit, died by suicide. This wasn't something the media covered much, but it deeply shook Agnetha. Just a year later, her father passed away too. Losing both parents in such a short time pulled her into one of the darkest periods of her life. She rarely spoke about it publicly, but those close to her said she changed after that. She became more private, more distant. But the truth is, sometimes silence isn't peace. It's pain with the volume turned down. While the world remembered her as the golden voice of ABBA, Agnetha was dealing with personal grief behind closed doors. Her retreat from music and public appearances wasn't just about rest anymore. It became a form of self-protection. People wanted her to keep smiling and singing, but they didn't see how broken she felt inside. It's easy to love someone for their voice, but it's harder to understand the person behind it. And then something came that made everything worse. During the late 1990s and early 2000s, Agnetha had a disturbing experience that left a permanent mark on her life. She became the target of a stalker, a Dutchman who claimed to be in love with her. At first, it seemed like a case of a devoted fan who didn't understand boundaries, but it quickly became more serious. He followed her, wrote letters, and even managed to get close to her property. Reports say they met a few times under strange circumstances, but Agnetha later realized it wasn't harmless. The situation grew so uncomfortable that she had to involve the police. The man was eventually deported, but the fear stayed with her. The invasion of her personal space, especially after the loss of her parents, made her trust people even less. She started seeing the world as something she needed protection from. Even though she was living far from the public eye, she didn't feel safe. And once someone loses that sense of safety, even home doesn't feel like home anymore. For many people, Agnetha seemed to vanish in the 1990s. After her solo projects in the 1980s, she stepped back completely. She stopped performing. She stopped giving interviews. Some fans thought she had retired. Others believed she was struggling with depression or anxiety. But Agnetha never gave a full explanation. She just stayed silent. She wasn't chasing headlines or trying to make a dramatic exit. She simply disappeared. No grand farewell, no final performance. Just silence. And in that silence, she was trying to heal. The pain of losing her parents, the fear of being watched, the pressure of always being adored, but rarely understood. All of it combined to create a life that looked peaceful on the outside, but was full of loneliness on the inside. Some people called her a recluse. Others said she had become fragile. But none of those words captured what was really happening. She wasn't fragile. She was just tired of being strong for everyone else. Even her neighbors barely saw her. People who lived nearby said she kept to herself, didn't attend local events, and rarely spoke to anyone unless she had to. It wasn't because she was rude, it was because she was protecting herself. After years of being a public figure, she had chosen a private life. But privacy can come at a cost. When you're no longer in the spotlight, the world stops asking how you're doing. Agnetha once described herself as someone who felt things deeply. She wasn't the kind of person who could just move on from pain. She carried it with her, quietly, like a song that never really ended. And the more people misunderstood her silence, the more she stayed silent. Fame had given her so much: money, success, a place in music history. But it also took things away: her peace, her privacy, her ability to just be a person, not a star. Even though she wasn't releasing albums or touring, her music never left the airwaves. ABBA's songs were still playing around the world. People still danced to Dancing Queen and sang along to The Winner Takes It All. But for Agnetha, those songs were memories of a life she had stepped away from. She didn't reject her past, but she also didn't want to live in it. She spent the 1990s almost completely out of sight. No tours, no big press moments, no flashy parties. Instead, she focused on being a mother, living quietly, and trying to rebuild her emotional strength. She still loved music, But she didn't love the pressure that came with it. Some say she recorded songs privately, just for herself. Maybe they'll never be heard. Maybe that was the point. She didn't owe anyone a comeback. She had already given the world more than most artists ever do. And yet, people still waited, still wondered, still hoped. What they didn't realize is that being loved by millions can still feel lonely when no one really sees you. Agnetha didn't walk away from fame because she stopped caring. She walked away because she cared too much about her family, about her peace, about her safety. Fame gave her a platform, but it didn't protect her heart. And in those quiet years, that heart was still healing. But here's the most astonishing part: the unexpected return. Just when the world thought Agnetha Fältskog had quietly faded into history, she did something no one expected. She returned, not with glitter or noise, but with grace. In 2004, nearly 2 decades after she had stepped back from the public eye, she released My Coloring Book, a tender collection of 1990s cover songs that had once shaped her as a young artist. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't made for charts, but it was heartfelt. And that's exactly why it worked. She didn't do interviews or world tours. She let the music speak. And yet, fans listened. The album reached the top of the charts in Sweden and performed well across Europe. Critics praised its warmth, and longtime fans welcomed her voice like an old friend they'd missed. It was her way of coming back on her own terms, without expectations or pressure. She didn't have to prove anything, she just wanted to sing again. However, she went back into silence again, and nearly a decade passed. But then, in 2013, something remarkable happened. Agnetha released a brand new album simply titled A. This wasn't just a nostalgic gesture, it was a fresh collection of original songs, written with her in mind. And despite her long absence, A climbed the charts in several countries. The single, When You Really Loved Someone, reminded listeners why they fell in love with her voice in the first place. It was soft, emotional, and unmistakably hers. Even she seemed surprised by the response. Agnetha didn't enjoy the spotlight, but the warm reception of A touched her. She did a few carefully selected interviews and even appeared in some press photos which were still private, still guarded, but present. There was a quiet strength in her decision to step forward again, not as a pop icon from the past, but as a woman still full of life and still full of music. And then, in 2024, at the age of 73, she did something no one could have predicted. She returned to that same album, A, and reimagined it. She called it A+. With fresh arrangements and renewed emotion, she revisited each track as though she were sitting beside her younger self, listening closely, responding. It was more than just a remix. It was a reflection, a musical conversation across time. And again, her fans listened quietly and respectfully, because by now they understood that Agnetha didn't make music to chase trends. She made music to tell the truth. But perhaps the most public moment in her late return came in 2021, when ABBA, after 40 years, announced their reunion. The world held its breath. It wasn't just about nostalgia. It was about closure, healing, a final chapter, written with care. The new album, Voyage, featured all 4 members and became a global sensation. But even then, Agnetha kept her distance. She appeared in promotional images and supported the release. But she didn't lean into the fame. She didn't perform at big events or soak up media attention. She remained, as always, quietly powerful. When asked about the reunion, she often answered with thoughtfulness but rarely with enthusiasm. The music mattered to her. The rest, the fame, the frenzy, never really did. In those rare moments where she opened up, especially in her 70s, Agnetha began to reflect more publicly on what aging meant to her. She spoke about solitude not as loneliness, but as peace. She had lived through the chaos of fame, the pain of loss, and the pressure of perfection. Now she found beauty in simple routines, long walks, and quiet days. She wasn't chasing relevance, she was embracing stillness. She also began to share more of her philosophy on fame. According to her, it was never the goal. It was a side effect. What she really cared about was connecting with people through music, not being admired, but being understood. She didn't need applause, she needed space. And now, in her later years, she had finally found it. Then, around her 75th birthday, something became clearer. Not through interviews or headlines, but through the choices she made and the music she quietly released. Agnetha didn't need to speak often to be understood. Her songs had always carried the weight of her truth. And in the season of her life, they carried even more. The way she revisited A and turned it into A+ felt personal, almost like a conversation with her younger self. The tenderness in her voice, the care in the arrangements, it all suggested a woman looking back, not with regret, but with reflection. She didn't need to spell it out. The music said enough. There were hints, too, in the lyrics she chose and the rare statements she did allow to surface. Hints of the anxiety that once haunted her on stage, the heartbreak of divorce, the fatigue of being adored but not truly known. But there was also peace, an acceptance that she no longer owed anyone explanations. She had nothing to prove. For many years, she had quietly questioned whether she would ever sing again, whether her voice, her place in the world, or even her joy could return. But slowly, without fanfare, she began to realize something important. Music didn't belong to the past. It lived inside her, always had, and even without a big speech or a tell-all, that truth reached people. Fans didn't need volume or spectacle. They heard her heart in every note, because Agnetha never shouted her story, she whispered it, and that's exactly why it stayed with many. Her return wasn't a comeback in the traditional sense. It wasn't driven by fame or nostalgia. It was a quiet reclaiming of something deeply personal. Through music, she found her way back to herself, not the version that others expected, but the one she'd protected all along. And now, looking back, her journey doesn't feel like a fall and rise. It feels like a long, winding melody, full of high notes and soft spaces. A life lived not for the crowd, but from the heart. Which part of Agnetha's journey resonated with you the most? And do you think Agnetha made the right choice by stepping away when she did? Drop it in the comments section below. If you enjoyed watching this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.